Welcome back, sports fans. Season 4 of the Brew and Shavers Sports Podcast, Episode 3. I know that can be a little confusing because my co-host Darren likes to put out all these standalone episodes, and you may be thinking, I'm watching a standalone. Didn't I just see that in the main episode?
Yeah.
But Darren wants to make sure that everybody is
Yep.
happy, and so he goes the extra mile on this show to make sure that if you don't want to watch the whole episode and look to see where your team's being highlighted, Darren has a standalone episode just for you.
And we love you guys that hang with us throughout the entire episode and all the episodes. And got to say, thank you very much because those numbers are growing. Awesome. So much appreciated. Subscribers have done this. That's so awesome. But also, we do put those standalone episodes out, especially during this time of year when we're doing the previews, like we're going to continue with tonight, because you might not be aware of who we are and what we do, but you see that you're going to talk about my favorite team for 8-10 minutes, whatever it ends up. So you might jump on that, and then they can come join the conversation with the rest of us after they hopefully like or don't like what we have to say, but at least want to talk about it.
You are so charitable, Darren. You must be one of the most charitable people I've ever met in my life.
No, that's not the case. But anyway,
as Darren mentioned, be sure to hit that like button, that
Absolutely.
subscribe button. Stay up to date with the latest episodes that come out. We have a lot of fun. We try not to take ourselves too seriously on this
Absolutely.
episode. There are some incredible college football podcasts out there. Some focus on the SEC that are terrific. So if you're a sports fan like you are, you probably listen to watch a whole bunch of them
Exactly.
like Darren and I do. So we're just very grateful that you choose to watch us. So
Very much
and when
so.
you hit that like button, that subscribe button, man, that means a lot to us. So
Absolutely.
we appreciate you so very much.
Yes.
Let's get into our previews for this week. We're highlighting 4 more SEC teams. We have Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi State, Missouri. I didn't hear anybody call the Hogs, Darren.
No, it didn't happen, but somebody did. Somebody watching this right now, we couldn't hear them, but I guarantee you, we said Arkansas, they said Woo Pig. Somebody in the other room of their house knew what was going on, even if we didn't hear them. So.
What are we about where we're located? 45 minutes from the Arkansas-Louisiana border?
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure I heard someone call the Hogs just then.
Shout out. It's 45 minutes because that's about how long. I know that because that's how long it takes to get to, what is that, Burgess Barbecue right across the state line. Shout
Louisville,
out.
Arkansas.
Yeah.
That's a must stop if you're going that way.
Absolutely. And are they not in a perfect location? Because you come to that little stop, you have to go right past them and make another. That's just about perfection for them.
But don't go too late. They'll be closed.
That's exactly right. And honestly, if it's cold and you're just getting it real quick, you be sure you park up front because it is cold and windy to stand out there and wait on your food. You gotta park close.
No doubt. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Razorbacks. Sam Pittman returns for another season at the helm. A little bit of pressure mounted last year. It did not go according to expectations. We've been clear on this show. We like Sam Pittman. We think he's doing a solid job. College football coaching is such a tough profession because your career hangs on the balance of these young men, and you don't know when someone's going to get injured or someone's going to have an issue, and sometimes you don't get the calls. All sorts of things go into play. But one of the beautiful things about sports is redemption stories, and Arkansas has become part of the Bobby Petrino redemption story.
Absolutely.
Had a great few years at the helm at Arkansas before scandal forced him to leave. He went around places like Western Kentucky, Louisville, Missouri State. Last year, he was the offensive coordinator at A&M. This year, he comes back to Arkansas, and Sam Pittman made no bones about it, Darren. He's like, I'm hiring who I think is going to help us win football
Yeah,
games.
absolutely. And you can't blame him. And I also in just listening to, I try to listen to a little bit about all the teams. Apparently, part of this process and getting to here is at some point, not necessarily recently, but in the last couple of years, Bobby Petrino actually went to I think it was the Little Rock Quarterback Club and spoke and really kind of did everything he could to kind of make amends for, basically, hey, sorry what I did to the program. And I think that really opened the door to put Sam Pittman in a position where this guy is the best available offensive mind. Let's get him back here and see what we can do. So good for both of them. That's kind of the steps, and that's what's been able to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, Darren. You're right. He apologized,
Yep,
and I think he's done that more than once. And
absolutely.
so, whether you think you like him or not, whether you know him or not, he's been successful. He seems to be penitent
Yep.
and turned over a new leaf. And so hopefully he can help Arkansas right the
Hmm.
ship this year. Although up front, they already start with some issues. I think they're losing three? They've lost three offensive linemen from last year.
Yep.
Now, Sam Pittman, that's kind of his wheelhouse, the offensive line, but I think he's brought in some help, and they've
Hmm.
also brought in some transfers. What are they doing with the offensive line, Darren?
I think the biggest thing is number one. I think they learned enough from the last couple of years that they did really target the portal. They didn't necessarily say we have to have D1 guys, but they Power Five guys, but they did kind of go after those a little bit, but also were willing to make a couple of moves that weren't necessarily Power Five guys, but guys that had a lot of starts under their belts and had a lot of size to them. They bring in. Eric Mateos, who, as the Baylor offensive line coach, had a Joe Moore finalist group as offensive line. He was a GA under Sam Pittman. And also, I think having the people in place that Sam Pittman does, I think that will allow him to put a little bit more focus in the place that, as you said, is his wheelhouse. So I think you could probably expect that he will be more involved already, as more involved as we're into camp full swing and getting close to the season. So I think those are to be some big things that I think we'll see make a big difference. Hopefully, for Sam Pittman's sake, make a big difference this year in that offensive line.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is going to be better this
Yeah,
year,
absolutely.
and they're going to need to be better
Hmm.
because there's a new era at quarterback.
Absolutely.
And KJ Jefferson left his mark on Arkansas. His
Hmm.
final year didn't quite match the standards of previous years, but you can't argue with the success he had there. But
Absolutely.
those are big shoes to fill. And so,
Hmm.
who's going to fill those shoes, Darren?
Well, in this era of the portal, Bobby Petrino basically handpicked Taylon Green from Boise State. I mean, he was literally the quarterback he wanted. And early returns in fall camp it is exactly what you would expect it to be. He looks like he is grasping the offense. I heard I was listening to a podcast of like a local station there in Fayetteville doing their sports, kind of their weekly wrap up of everything that had gone on, and they referenced an interview that Taylon Green said. Somebody said, "What's the biggest impact Bobby Petrino has had on you?" And he said, when he looks at us and says, every time we step on the field, we will score, he's not kidding. And that's not, coaches have said that in the past, but he's not playing. And even in practice, if we have an offensive series where we don't score, he's mad. We know it. And so it's instilling that drive, that fight, that desire in all of these guys that when you step on the field, you better score because that's what's expected. So, knowing his background and what he was able to do at Boise State, it would not surprise me if Taylon Green comes up with 3,000 total offensive yards this year. It can be in a various of forms: 2,000 yards passing, or 2,200 yards passing, 800 yards rushing, some kind of mix. But it would not surprise me if that's his final stat line at the end of the year. He's responsible for about 3,000 yards of total offense. I think he is going to be impressive to watch in this Bobby Petrino offense. And when you look back at first year quarterbacks in his system, those are not outrageous numbers. Somewhere in the 2 to 3,000 yards passing, somewhere in the 400 to 700 yards rushing, depending on the quarterback. That's kind of a standard for a first year in a Bobby Petrino offense. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see that this year.
Bold prediction.
Ah,
But Darren, who's Green going to hand the ball off to? Rocket Sanders is gone, so
absolutely.
who does Arkansas have to fill his shoes?
Arkansas did pretty well in the transfer portal this year. They didn't land into these huge like, oh, that's a top 5 portal guy, but they really went to strengths and found guys that fit in the system. And they pulled from Utah State, Jaquindon Jackson. Did I say that name right? Yeah, Jaquindon Jackson, and he had 1,250 yards at Utah State. Now that is not the SEC, and we know that. However, he is built Ford tough, as they say. he runs with some intensity, and I think he will fit in well. He also has good hands coming out of the backfield, which is huge in a Bobby Petrino offense. So I think he's going to fit in well and really play an important part in this offense this year.
The wide receiver group is a
Mm-hmm.
strong returning group. They
Yep.
they should be good there. They've got
Yeah.
they look pretty set at tight end as well. What do you notice in the wide receiving core, tight ends? You feel pretty good about where Arkansas is?
I do. I think they're going to do well. They brought back two of two of the kind of the biggest numbers from last year, and the tight end I think is going to be a strength that is really utilized this year, which obviously under Dan Enos was not the case last year. Like many things, was not the case under his offense, and I think that tight end room is a deep room that really will have an opportunity to shine in a Petrino style offense.
And I think it starts with returner Luke. I believe his last name is pronounced Has.
Mm-hmm.
He was beat up last year, but the guy
Mm-hmm.
has a lot of talent, a lot of
Strong.
upside, and if he can stay healthy, that will be a big boost to the Razorback offense.
Absolutely.
Let's move over to the defensive line or defensive side, where 3 defensive line starters are returning,
Mm-hmm.
and that includes Landon Jackson, an all SEC defensive end,
Mm-hmm.
6.5 sacks last year. Their starting defensive tackles returned: Cameron Ball, Eric Gregory.
Yeah.
They look pretty solid up front, and they've added a few transfers to make that unit to solidify it even further.
Yeah. They added Savion Sori. I hope I'm saying that correctly. The linebacker from Georgia is someone that they added. And then, the two you mentioned, Landon Jackson and Eric Gregory, man, those are names that when you talk about defensive tackles in the SEC, people talk about. Those guys are in a position to wreck some offenses this year. And I think we will see them do that. I think they're going to be strong up front. Their secondary can be strong, but it kind of depends on how it meshes and kind of all forms together. But I think um, I think they're going to have a defense. I don't know that you can say it's going to be improved over last year. Hopefully that'll be the case, but I don't think we'll see a defense that backslides compared to last year.
I'm excited to see the guy they got from Albany who had 15 sacks last
Yeah.
season. I mean, those are incredible numbers. How's that going to transfer in the SEC?
Yeah,
I'm excited to watch.
absolutely. Very, very good point.
Well, let's look at the Arkansas schedule and make some predictions on where we think they're going to wind up at the end of the year. If you guys, Arkansas fans, want to go ahead and do your woo pig suey,
There
now's
you
your
go.
chance.
There's your chance.
They're starting off against the Arkansas Pine Bluff Golden Lions.
You got to start strong, right? That's one of the secrets to a good schedule.
Yeah, hey, in-state games.
That's right.
You know that if you're an Arkansas fan, if you live in Arkansas, you appreciate those in-state games. So
Absolutely.
then they will have a battle against Oklahoma State
Yeah.
and Mike Gundy, and who knows how that's going to
What they're going
go.
to look like.
And but I'm sure Mike Gundy will tell us before and after.
That's right. He's a
Then
man.
they
I couldn't help it. Sorry.
then they've got the UAB Blazers. You gotta love that dragon
Yep.
logo representing House of the Dragon there. Go UAB. The program that came back from the dead.
Extinction. Yeah.
It's like an actual Jon Snow story. He came back from the dead. But any UAB usually plays pretty tough. They
Yeah,
usually
absolutely.
field a solid team, and then they start SEC play, Auburn, A&M, Tennessee, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas. Um, yeah, that's just a rough stretch.
Yeah, that's the thing is that the positive for them is depending on what their defense looks like. I think they have a potential to go into that A&M game 4-0. Because you win those first three out of the gate. Depending on what Oklahoma State looks like, that's obviously one of their biggest hurdles in the first three games, the first non-conference games. And then, if you roll into that Auburn game, even though it's at Auburn, that does hurt a little bit. But still, if you roll into that 3-0, you got to feel decent about that. But then A&M, Tennessee, LSU. I mean, the only saving grace of those games is at least two of the three are at home. But when those two games are Tennessee and LSU, I don't know how big of a difference how big of a difference that makes. And then you finish. You have to go to Mississippi State, which we'll talk about them a little bit later. Ole Miss and Texas is going to be very, very tough. Louisiana Tech, they're a team that can sneak up on you, especially that the Louisiana Tech game is in a position to be a death nail game. If things have gone off the rails, that could potentially be the game if they don't get beat by 60 points by Texas, if things have gone off the rails. If they don't get beat by 60 points by Texas and then slip up and lose Louisiana Tech, that could be the game where Bobby Petrino ends up with the title interim head coach.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunately in a position to be that. Hopefully that hasn't been the case, and Sam Pittman and his team is having a good year. But I think you have to consider that a realistic something you got to think about. And then to close with Missouri, that's going to be pretty tough.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot here that
Yep.
could go either way.
Yep.
They always play LSU tough, so
Absolutely.
that's always a game. I know as an LSU fan, I'm always apprehensive
Yep.
when we play
Yep.
Arkansas, but we'll see how the season pans out. I think they're going to do better than they did last year. Over to Georgia, where the Georgia Bulldogs, who, for what it's worth, Darren, I think was the best team in the country
Oh,
last year.
absolutely.
The loss to Alabama knocked them out
Mm-hmm.
for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason, for whatever logic was employed there. Anyway, but you can't go back and change that. But
No.
they are back and they are fully loaded despite losing superstar tight end Brock Bowers on offense. They return Carson Beck at quarterback, who most likely will be in the Heisman conversation this year. Almost 4,000 yards passing last year. The guy completes over 70% of his passes. Georgia lost some running backs, but they picked up a transfer from Florida and Trevor Etienne. Wide receivers, we talk about who Georgia lost, Darren, but Georgia just reloads.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like, okay, they
Absolutely.
lost this guy, they lost it. Oh, wait a second. They got
Yep.
this guy coming in, this guy coming in. Really, aside from the arrest over the driving
Yeah.
incidents, the only drama we have is Ra Thomas, who they
Yeah.
signed, who has now been dismissed from the program, and with good reason. But
Absolutely.
uh, I don't see Georgia losing much of a step on offense.
No, and you talked about, like you said, what they've lost at wide receiver, what they've lost at tight end, and you look, they've still got Carson Beck. They still have an incredible offensive line. They still have Oscar Delk at tight end, which is going to have the opportunity to have, I think, a breakout season. What he's done in the couple of scrimmages that they've had so far has been noteworthy. People have paid attention. So there really is some strength there. Um, and like you said, I just I don't think they're going to miss much of a beat this year on offense. I don't think it's unreasonable to think about Carson Beck having a Heisman level season. I think that's a very realistic possibility.
On the defensive side of the ball, uh, they return a lot of pieces from a top five defense last year.
Hmm.
One of the losses, well, not really a loss, but Will Muschamp has moved into an analyst role. Uh, the reason given so to spend more time with family, but Muschamp is still around. He's a great defensive mind. And
Absolutely.
again, I'm looking at their losses. They lost some players in the secondary, but they've got an All-American safety returning.
Yep.
Uh, they reload. They bring back
Yeah.
some strong players, and they just add to their strength every year. When you're looking at this defense, Darren, what sticks out to you?
I tell you, you've got to. You just talked about how they've lost pieces of their secondary, and you look down the list at not only their four as far as the defensive backfield, but expand that out to the eight. You know, the people that are probably in Georgia world, the eight that are going to get. You've got eight that can get that playing time, and it doesn't really matter how you mix and match that. You've got a secondary that can pretty much cover anybody and can really cover teams and make it really difficult on other teams. And then, you know, again, yes, they lost guys on the defensive line, but you've got guys stepping in that, you know, when you think, so what does a defensive tackle look like? You know, all you got to do is look those guys up, and there's what a defensive tackle, a robot defensive tackle is supposed to look like. You know, Dalen Everett is one of the names that sticks out in the secondary at quarterback. He is getting some attention. Mikael, I think I'm saying that right. Mikael Williams at D end is another name that has popped up a lot during camp that people are excited about. And I mean, this is a defense that lost everything we've talked about and still returned or is returning 57% of their defensive production. That's just insane. So I think this has a real shot of being another elite level defense for this Georgia team.
No doubt, no doubt about it.
Yep.
Georgia's still, I think, going to be the team to beat in the SEC.
Yep.
So let's look at their schedule as they head into this year. They start off with a big one against Clemson.
Yeah.
Uh, who knows what Dabo's going to have up his sleeve for that game? Then they have Tennessee Tech, the Golden Eagles. That's the second mascot we've had on
Oh
this
yeah,
show that
that's right.
starts with Golden. We've got the Golden Lions, the
Golden
Golden
Eagles.
Eagles. Hmm.
Nice. I like it.
They've got the Kentucky Wildcats,
Yep.
followed by Alabama. Alabama, Auburn, back to back. Ouch.
Yeah, that's tough.
But it's Georgia.
That's
Mississippi
right.
State, Texas. That's going to be a good one to
Yep.
watch. Florida, which poor Florida. We'll talk about them
Oh
in
yeah.
another episode. They probably have the toughest
Oh,
schedule out
absolutely.
there. Ole Miss challenge. I'm really looking forward to this Tennessee game
Yeah,
because
agree completely.
I think Tennessee's a team to watch this year. I have them
Mhm.
ranked. If you go back to the episode on our ranking of where we think everyone's going to wind up this year, I
Mhm.
had Tennessee up pretty high. This game's going to be telling.
Yeah.
Then they got UMass. As we'll get into the show, UMass is a recurring theme on these schedules.
Yep.
The Minutemen, right?
Yeah, that's right. The Minutemen are going to spend a minute on some SEC fields this year.
And go back home with a little bit more money in their pockets.
Have more than a minute's worth to pay. That's exactly right.
And then, and then they end with Georgia Tech.
Yep.
What do you think of this? I forgot to ask you what you think Arkansas's record was going to be. We just said we thought they were going to be
Yeah,
better than last
absolutely.
year. When you look at Georgia, what are you thinking here?
You know, I think the two interesting pieces are kind of small little snippets of this schedule that really kind of stand out to me is that Kentucky, Alabama back to back on the road, and then Ole Miss, Tennessee, especially with the Ole Miss game being on the road. I think those are two pretty interesting back to back tests. Number one, I think Kentucky is good enough that they can make Georgia pay a little bit of attention. I think that's going to be the case this year. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you, so you better look out for this Kentucky? No, I'm not. However, if you're Kentucky bringing to the table what it appears you're going to bring to the table this year, and you're playing a Georgia that's got Alabama on the backside of you, that's a little bit of a favorable spot for Kentucky. That, especially with it being in Lexington, that gives them a chance to really maybe sneak up on Georgia. I know that sounds crazy, Don't think it's going to happen, but it's a good spot. And then Ole Miss, Tennessee, back to back. That's going to be that's when you learn everything you need to learn as far as when it comes to preparing for the postseason for Georgia. How those two games go, I think, is going to tell you a lot about this team and what they're going to look like when they get into this expanded playoff, which obviously we think they're going to, because that is to go on the road and face Ole Miss, as good as it seems they're going to be this year, and come home just to have Tennessee roll into town, and everything looks like they're rolling into town with the Thunder. Uh, that's going to be an interesting. They are going to be thankful to be looking at UMass when those two games are over with. I really think. Now, again, I guess the question is, we were talking about win-loss records. Do they go undefeated this year? Is that realistic? Is it a possibility? Let's say it that way.
I think Texas and Tennessee are their biggest
Yeah,
challenges.
agree. Agree. Like I said, that's that back half, and obviously, if you add Texas to that, I think that's where we learn everything we need to know about this Georgia team.
But these are the schedules that we want and we're getting
Oh,
now with this 12-team playoff.
absolutely.
When I look at Georgia's schedule, I'm not a Georgia fan, but I'm going to watch every one of those games. I don't really care about the Tennessee Tech game,
Right.
and I don't really care about the UMass game,
Yeah.
but all the rest of those, I look forward to watching those. You know, we do that a lot, Darren. We record games because
Yep.
you can't watch them all live,
Absolutely.
and we go back and watch them all, and this is a
Yep.
great schedule.
Yeah, it really is. It'll be a fun schedule to watch.
Well, let's move from Athens, Georgia to Starkville, Mississippi. Stark
Start
Vegas,
Vegas.
home of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. As we talk about them starting a new era with the head coach Jeff Libby, Darren, we've said it before on this show. We miss Mike Leach.
Absolutely.
What a great ambassador for
Yeah.
college football.
Yeah.
And so Mississippi State, I think they're still dealing with the trauma
Absolutely.
and the shock of his untimely passing, but I think they've got a good guy taking
Absolutely.
over the program in Jeff Libby. He's an offensive
Mm-hmm.
mind. He's had great offenses at Baylor,
Mm-hmm.
UCF, Ole
Mm-hmm.
Miss, most recently at Oklahoma. In fact, his offense at Oklahoma last year, I believe, was a top 5 offense in the nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And isn't he the one that has the slogan "Score from far"? Something like that. Doesn't he have a slogan like that?
Oh man, I heard him say it yesterday. I was watching an interview and I'm blank. Score from. Oh,
I think it's "Score from far."
yeah, I think you're right.
Anyway, and so we led with the good news here
Mm-hmm.
because Darren, it gets very challenging rather quickly. All 11 offensive starters are
Yeah,
gone.
exactly.
This is the definition of a rebuild.
Yeah.
And Libby started by getting his quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
Blake Shapen from Baylor,
Yep.
a local kid from here, Northwest Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
Shreveport. I think he played at Evangel,
Yep.
had some success at Baylor, but he fits what I think Libby is going to try to do
Mm-hmm.
uh, at Mississippi State. And what do you see about? Do you think that's a good fit there? Or?
I think it very much falls into the category of what we were talking about with Arkansas. In the portal day, you can kind of pick your quarterback. This is the guy we want to bring here, and I think that's exactly what they did in bringing him in, uh, Blake Shapen in from Baylor. Uh, you know, when he talks about his wide receiver room, he really honestly feels that at this point in camp they are progressing to a place where they have 7 to 8 guys that they can put out there that really, obviously not all of them are downfield threats, but they are they are production threats. And he feels like they're really developing that wide receiver room to look like that. They have a running back, I think it's Kevon, I believe is the way his name is pronounced, Kevon Lee, that got a lot of attention in their scrimmage, their ones versus ones scrimmage. There's a lot of local.
That's the kid from Penn State, isn't it?
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so he's got experience. He is loving this system, and he runs heavy. He really brings an impact, and Jeff Levy's really excited about him. Talks a lot about him, and like you said, that all of that's the good news. The bad news is you're talking about starting from, ground zero. We were talking about Georgia and what they brought to the table with their defensive production. This Mississippi State offense brings back 17% of their offensive production from last year. So, the upside is he was in position to do a rebuild. He didn't have to break down a lot of bad habits. He could just start teaching. Here
There's a
we
lot of
go.
advantage. There's advantage to
Yep,
that.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I apologize to Bulldogs fans. I get going talking quickly, and I was pronouncing his name Libby, and it's
Yeah.
Levy. So I want to make sure I slow down there. But didn't he also bring in a four-star quarterback, Michael Van Buren, kind of his quarterback of the future?
Right, exactly. He got him in his recruiting class this year. A four-star quarterback kind of fits the mold of what he's looking for, and I'm sure he's super excited about the fact that he gets an opportunity to learn from Blake Shapen and watch what he does in
Mhm.
this offense. So that's a positive all the way around.
Yeah. On the defensive side of the field, a new defensive coordinator as well, Coleman Hutzler, who's spent time at Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Texas. I think we're going to see a change from Zach Arnett's scheme to Hutzler's scheme, uh, but he's got a defense that's losing 8 starters. But I tell you what, they've got some of my favorite linebackers. Was it the Watson and the Johnson kid? These guys are tackling machines.
Exactly. They are going to be super exciting to watch. And actually, another guy that started out in the spring as a linebacker, Joe Head. It looked like he was going to be a pretty strong middle linebacker, and they have moved him over to edge because he
Mm,
is fierce. And Levy was actually asked in a press conference, "What do you see when you take a Joe Head and move him from a middle linebacker to an edge defender?" And he said, "I see a guy that is ferocious when he wants to get to the football, and that's what we want on the edge." So that's pretty exciting. And then they also have a couple of safeties that I think are going to be pretty fun to watch and bring some stability and some strength to this secondary of Mississippi State. In Isaac Smith, who is a sophomore, and then also Brylan Lanier, whose nickname is Brylo, is what they call him, and I'll reference that again in just a second. But he's had a path where he started out at Alabama, ended up in Indiana, and then went through this past season. He was at East Mississippi, which is famous for the what's the name of the show? I just went blank.
mhm.
On Netflix.
Last
Last Chance
chance.
U. There you go.
Mm,
So he went through the East Mississippi program and then he ended up here at Mississippi State. And one of the things people are very impressed with his talent. But one of the things I've seen referenced 3 or 4 times in either articles I've read or interviews I've listened to is he had been on campus just a couple of weeks. And it seemed like every time you turned around, you were hearing another player say, "Hey, Brylo." He like almost instantly became a chemistry and a leadership guy. And that's something you're going to have with this defense this year. Because if you're Coleman Hutzler, you're calling defense now for the first time that you're calling the plays. He's never been the play caller in a defensive coordinator role before, and you're doing it in a Jeff Levy system where you're probably going to be calling and have your defense on the field for 85 to 90 plays a game. That's going to be tough. So if I'm a Mississippi State fan, there's a lot of excitement with this defense, but that's the very, very scary piece of the puzzle. What does all of that look like when we're in third quarter, when we're in fourth quarter? Honestly, if they're going to lose, they'll probably still lose even in an exciting fashion. I don't think it'll be boring because of this offense, but I think it's the defense is in a very tough spot to be developing in with everything they lost, only returning 23% of their production, having a new play caller as the DC. That's going to be tough. And if I'm a Mississippi State fan, that's the thing to watch. Now, Sven on YouTube, you are not going to like that, but It's truth. I'm saying it with absolute appreciation and love for the Mississippi State program. Just want to throw that in.
I think the Bulldogs will be competitive this year,
Yeah.
but with all the changes and Levy getting his system going,
Yep.
uh, that may not translate into as many wins as Bulldogs fans would like. So let's look at their schedule. They start off with Eastern Kentucky University,
Mm-hmm.
followed by Arizona State, the Toledo Rockets from the MAC.
Yep.
Don't underestimate Toledo.
That's right.
They've got Florida. Who knows what Florida is going to look like this
Exactly.
year? A big game with Texas and Georgia and A&M back to back. Oh my goodness gracious!
That is nasty.
Arkansas, and then they get hopefully a breather with UMass.
Hopefully.
But my goodness, then it picks right back up.
Yep.
Look how they end the season: Tennessee, Missouri, and Ole Miss. The Egg Bowl. Ouch.
Yeah. And two of those three are on the road. I mean, that's ugly. Um, and when you look at this schedule, if you want to be optimistic but realistic, obviously the game one's a win. You hope. Um, Even with all of the difficulties that we've talked about, I feel like an Arizona State game is a win. That would genuinely surprise me if Arizona State, even though it's in Arizona, if they snuck in a win there, that would catch me off guard. Beat Toledo, so you go into the Florida game and you get them at home at 3-0. So I think there's some optimism there that you might have a shot at 4-0 there, depending on what Florida looks like. But then have mercy. The next 8 games. I mean, if I'm a Mississippi State fan, I mean, I am crossing my fingers that the wheels fall off in a hurry in Arkansas, because that's at least my shot at a 5th win. And then I got UMass. I mean, that's the path to bowl eligibility. And I think that's a shaky path at best. I think they're going to be excited about the future. They're going to love what the offense looks like, but I think it's going to be a tough season where I mean, I think you have got to have some pieces fall into place to get to that 6 wins to get to a bowl game this year for Mississippi State.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts
Yep,
there.
definitely.
Well, let's move up north to one of the famous border states from the Civil War, Missouri. And let's talk a little bit about Eli Drinkwitz's
Wits.
program.
Mizou. I don't think I knew until the last couple of weeks that was a thing, that they chant that a lot. But anyway, apparently they do in the stadium. So anyway,
I've never been to that
no,
stadium. I don't know.
me neither.
Makes sense. On offense, they lose just an incredible performer, competitor, football player, Cody Schrader. They're going to have to replace him. They've got a couple of kids. They got a guy from Georgia State, a guy from App State. They've got transfers coming in on the offensive line, but they've got some continuity on offense with quarterback Brady Cook and Luther Burden at wide receiver. In fact, I think they returned their top 3 wide receivers,
Yeah,
if I'm not
exactly.
mistaken.
Yeah. We can't leave
Brady,
Theo Weiss off of that. He was
yeah,
overshadowed by Luther Burden, but he's strong.
great year.
Yeah.
And Mookie Cooper is the other one,
Yep.
I
Yep.
believe. Brady Cook avoided injury last year, had a really solid campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I expect him to have another strong campaign this year.
Yeah, agree completely. I think that's going to be if that's going to be the real kind of thing to watch, is just how far, because his leap from 2 years ago to this past year. I mean, this time last year, there's conversations about, is that our guy? Is Brady Cook our guy? I mean, there were conversations about Coach Drinkwitz. Is that our guy? It was a totally different conversation this time last year, but there wasn't a whole lot of belief. Eli Drinkwitz is having conversations about how, basically, how dare you boo our quarterback? I mean, there was some uncertainty around Brady Cook, and so that step was just an enormous step. So one of the things to watch is, how big is that step this year from last year to this year? Does he take another monumental type leap and really get to that point where the game is slowed down and it almost looks too easy? And when he's throwing to the people he's throwing to, yeah, I mean, they did some work on the offensive line, brought in some good transfers, some big guys, and this Marcus Carroll from Georgia State. I mean, he had 1,350 yards last year, and that was at Georgia State, and I understand that. But at the same time, 4.9 yards per attempt. Those are big numbers. That's a guy that knows who to explode through a hole and get into open space. So I feel like, and I think, listened to an interview with or a press conference with Coach Drinkwitz. He said he runs big. He's one of those guys that runs for 6 and falls for 8. Even in the fall, he gets another 2 yards, and that's just kind of the way his game is. So I think that's a good piece, and I think this is an offense that produces 1,000-yard runner. I don't think that's unrealistic. So I think there's some real excitement for offense this year.
Definitely. On the defensive side, there's excitement as well. The way they just manhandled Ohio State in the bowl game
Oh,
last year, just
absolutely.
shut them down. However, the biggest loss on defense is defensive coordinator Blake Baker.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
addition to him leaving, they lose guys in the secondary, linebacker, on the edge, interior linemen.
Yep.
In fact, we could say most of their starters are gone, and then injuries. I think
Yeah.
Darren, you were talking about what 5 days ago or whatever.
Hmm.
Darius Smith, defensive end, out for the
Yeah,
season.
and they were excited about him coming over from Georgia. They were very excited about him.
So they've got Corey Batoon coming in
Hmm.
to replace Blake Baker as defensive coordinator. Uh, what do you look? Uh, what do you expect from this defense?
There are a couple of people that really kind of stand out. I think Johnny Walker is a guy that's going to get some attention, but I also think Dylan Carroll has the possibility of being a defensive a breakout star. His name has come up a lot, and it wouldn't surprise me if that continues to be a trend throughout the rest of the camp. And as we start the season and really get into play, those are two names to kind of be on the lookout for as uh, established stars and or breakout stars during the process of this year on the defensive side of the ball for Missouri.
Let's look at Missouri's schedule heading into this season. They start off with Murray State, the
Mhm.
Racers. Remind me to tell you sometime, Darren. I stopped in Murray State one time and went to a local restaurant to watch a Kentucky basketball game that was packed full of people. It was quite an experience. I'll tell you about that sometime.
Absolutely.
Following the Murray State Racers, they have the Buffalo Bulls, not the Bills, the Bulls. Then they've got Boston College, Vanderbilt, A&M. Oh, there's UMass
There
again.
we go.
The Minutemen are on the march. And look at this stretch: Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas. Ouch.
Yeah.
Especially that Auburn,
Yeah.
Alabama, OU. Goodness gracious.
But I got to tell you, let's look at this schedule. And number one, that's not a typo. We talked about last week the darker colors are at home and the lighter colors are on the road. That's accurate. Missouri is going to UMass. Uh, every single Missouri commentator, podcaster, whoever it was I've listened to over the last few weeks followed that game on the schedule up with for some reason. That was like the universal. We're actually going to UMass for some reason. But anyway, so that's not a typo. But you look at the schedule, and yes, that stretch right there, Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma, that's pretty tough. But look at who's not on this schedule. There is no Tennessee. There is no Georgia. There is no Texas. Those
There's
are
no
there is no
LSU.
there's no LSU. There's no Ole Miss. I mean, you talking about the day this schedule came out, happy tears, but I'm still confident Eli Drinkwitz sat in a corner and cried for a little bit. Joy, they tears of joy, but because depending on how the seasons shake out, that Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas into the schedule could be tough, or could be a really, really nice build to the end of another incredible season, depending on how the seasons for all three of those teams are going at that point. Alabama, OU, at least you've got one of those two at home, and this Missouri, as they look right now, has shown that nobody is safe at home. It doesn't matter who it is. So that's got to feel good if you're looking at this schedule. I mean, obviously they roll into A&M 4-0. That's going to be a very, very good game. That stretch of Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma, if they roll into that stretch 6-0, they've pulled off the A&M win there at Kyle Field and beat UMass, and then get Auburn at home at 6-0. That's going to be a tough game for Auburn to win. And you roll into this Alabama Oklahoma stretch at 7-0. I think it makes a pretty dramatic difference of what these two games look like.
Yeah.
There's some
I
real
agree.
potential here.
I agree. And I would be worried about the last two games.
Yep.
Regardless of how Mississippi State's season's going, Levy's going to want to finish strong. And
Absolutely.
if you come in with a Missouri team comes into Starkville that is just riding high in terms of wins and losses,
Yep.
and you have a chance to knock them off, watch that game. And then Arkansas, depending on how their season goes,
Yep.
that's somewhat of a rivalry game. So I would be concerned as a Missouri fan about those two games in particular.
Yeah, especially when you consider the fact that with both of those teams, what we've talked about is the offense will be able to, from what we see right now, the offense will be able to give anybody trouble. And Missouri, that's where the questions are, is on defense. So that does kind of set up to be a difficult circumstance potentially.
Yeah, and I think I called it previous. I think Oklahoma is going to beat them this year.
Yeah,
but we'll wait and see. So that's our 4 previews for this week's episode. Let us know what you think. Give us your feedback, your comments. What did we get right? What did we get wrong?
Mm-hmm.
What were we completely off base about? Don't hold back at all. Let us know
absolutely
your thoughts. We appreciate you joining us on this journey. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button. New episodes come out every Tuesday. So until then, y'all take care.
Have a great week.
Thank you for making the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast your go-to sports show. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show if you haven't already. Your feedback is so important. Let us know what you think about this week's show. Send an email to brewandshavers@gmail.com or a text to our text line 318-390-3599. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for listening to the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast. See you next week.